At 8:43 that night, my husband sold me for $42 million while holding my hand. He didn't do it secretly in another room. He did it across a candlelit dinner table, close enough for his wedding ring to touch mine. Adrian raised his wine glass, looked at his business partner, and switched to Spanish. The vineyard, the farmhouse, the family name, and Nora. She comes with the deal. Mateo slowly looked me up and down. Does she know what happens after she signs? My husband of 17 years squeezed my fingers and laughed. She doesn't even know what we're saying. Then, Adrian leaned over, kissed my cheek, and whispered in English, "Mateo thinks your dress is beautiful." I smiled, because I had understood every word. Adrian didn't know I had spent 18 months secretly learning Spanish from the women who harvested our grapes. But there was something I didn't know yet. Inside the black folder beside his plate were 4 forged signatures, $11 million of debt in my name, and a clause giving Mateo control of my face, my home, and the next 5 years of my life. My husband would receive $7 million. I would receive a cage disguised as a contract. But both men had one problem. They still needed my real signature. Adrian slid the contract toward me and placed a gold pen beside my hand. "It's only a preliminary form," he said. "Sign it, and we can start celebrating." Mateo stopped drinking. Adrian stopped breathing. Both men watched as I picked up the pen and lowered it toward the signature line. Then, I knocked my full glass of red wine across the contract. While they jumped from their chairs, I hid my phone beneath the table and sent one message: "Lock my father's archive room. Adrian is trying to sell me." 72 hours later, my husband would place another gold pen in my hand. This time, we would be standing in front of our employees, attorneys, investors, and local reporters. I would look directly at Mateo and answer him in perfect Spanish: "The wife does not come with the deal." Then the doors behind him would open, and the one woman neither man expected would walk into the room. That moment would cost Adrian his company, his $7 million payment, and his marriage. But to reach it, I first had to finish dinner beside the man I loved, sleep next to him for 2 more nights, and let him believe I still knew nothing. So tell me honestly in the comments, would you have exposed him to the table, or smiled until you discovered everything he had stolen? And if you believe a proud woman should never be mistaken for a powerless one, click this video and subscribe to my channel. My name is Nora. Until that night, I believed the worst thing a husband could do was step away from his wife. I was wrong. The worst thing he could do was calculate exactly how much it cost to do. Taylor Ridge Vineyard had belonged to my family for 53 years. My father bought the first fully vineyard when he was 26. The people lived at one place in the vineyard, hundreds of acres of land, in a farmhouse with no way of competing. Everyone felt my fear. My mother felt my dread. Together, they turned that forgotten piece of land into one of the most respected family vineyards in Virginia. I grew up among oak barrels and grapevines. By 12, I could identify different varieties by their leaves. By 16, I was working harvest beside people 3 times my age. Hale Ridge wasn't simply my inheritance, it was my family's story written into the soil. I met Adrian when I was 28. He arrived as a financial consultant after a disastrous harvest left us dangerously close to bankruptcy. He was intelligent, charming, and almost frighteningly confident. Where I saw frightened employees and families depending on us, Adrian saw numbers that could be reorganized. Within 6 months, he had renegotiated our loans, reduced unnecessary expenses, and found 3 new distributors. My father trusted very few people. But he trusted Adrian. So did I. We married 2 years later beneath the old elm tree behind the farmhouse. My father stood beside us and placed my hand inside Adrian's. "Hale Ridge will always belong to Nora," he told him. "You can help her carry it, but never make her carry you." Everyone laughed. Adrian laughed the loudest. For a long time, I believed he had kept that promise. He stayed awake with me during dangerous frosts. He slept on the barrel room floor when a storm damaged the roof. When my father became sick, Adrian drove him to appointments and sat beside his hospital bed. I won't pretend all 17 years were fake. That would make the betrayal easier, but it wouldn't make it honest. There had been love between us once. The tragedy was that somewhere along the way, Adrian began confusing my trust with ownership. After my father died, Adrian became president of the vineyard's operating company. I remained the majority owner and public face of Hale Ridge. Adrian managed the contracts, financing, and expansion. "You're the heart of this place," he always told me. "Let me handle the ugly numbers." At first, that sounded like love. Eventually, it became a way of keeping me away from anything he didn't want me to see. 18 months before that dinner, I began learning Spanish. Many of our longest-serving workers spoke it at home. I hated relying on someone else whenever an employee wanted to tell me something personal. Teresa Morales, our head winemaker, started teaching me every morning before work. Adrian heard me practicing once and laughed for almost a full minute. "You sound like a confused tourist," he said. I told him he was right. I said I had given up. But I hadn't. Teresa and I continued meeting at 6 every morning. I listened to lessons during my drives and practiced with our workers. By the night Adrian introduced me to Mateo Salazar, I wasn't perfect. But I was fluent enough to recognize when my husband was discussing my future as if I weren't sitting beside him. The dinner took place at an expensive private restaurant overlooking the river. Adrian had described Mateo as the man who could secure Hale Ridge for the next generation. Mateo represented Salazar Meridian, an international hospitality company that owned luxury resorts across Europe and South America. According to Adrian, the company wanted to invest in Hale Ridge, expand our distribution, and build a small hotel beside the vineyard. He called it a partnership. Their Spanish conversation told a different story. After Adrian said I came with the deal, Mateo took another drink and asked, "Does she know the farmhouse is included?" Adrian shook his head. "She believes she can continue living there. And when construction begins, I'll deal with her after she signs." Mateo's eyes moved toward me. "And her name? We keep it. Hale Ridge means nothing without a Hale attached to it. For the entire 5 years, she'll do whatever the contract requires. What if she refuses?" Adrian glanced at me and smiled. "She won't. Nora is loyal." Mateo raised an eyebrow. "Loyal to you?" "Loyal to the memory of her father. Tell her something protects his legacy, and she'll sign anything." I kept my expression calm, but my wedding ring suddenly felt unbearably heavy. For 17 years, I had considered loyalty one of my greatest strengths. Adrian had turned it into a weakness on a spreadsheet. Mateo switched to English. "Adrian tells me you're deeply devoted to your family's legacy." "It means everything to me," I answered. "Then, I'm sure we'll become very close." He smiled as though he knew something I didn't. Adrian squeezed my knee beneath the table. There was a command hidden inside the gesture. "Smile, be charming, don't ask difficult questions." A waiter poured more wine. Then Adrian opened the black folder and placed the contract in front of me. The first page was less than 200 words. It described cooperation, confidentiality, and shared intentions. But beneath it were nearly 70 pages of schedules and legal language. "What are those?" I asked. "Standard material," Adrian said. "Nothing binding. I'd like Miriam to review it." Miriam Blake had been my father's attorney for almost 30 years. For one brief second, Adrian's smile disappeared. Then it returned. "Miriam is practically retired. We don't need to disturb her over a routine form. If it's routine, it can wait until tomorrow." Mateo watched us silently. Adrian leaned closer. "Nora, don't embarrass me. Don't jeopardize the deal. Don't embarrass me." That was when I spilled the wine. As the waiter rushed forward and Adrian tried to rescue the stained pages, I sent my message to Teresa. Then I excused myself and walked into the restroom. My legs started shaking the moment the door closed behind me. I gripped the sink and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me appeared composed, elegant, and completely in control. But inside, 17 years of memories were collapsing, our wedding beneath the elm tree, Adrian holding me at my father's funeral, the mornings he brought coffee to my office, the nights he promised we would grow old together in the farmhouse. I wanted to drive home, tear through his office, and demand the truth. Then I remembered Matteo looking me up and down. I remembered Adrian saying I would do whatever the contract required. If I confronted him too early, he would destroy evidence and rewrite the story. So I washed my hands, corrected my lipstick, and returned to the table. Adrian had removed the ruined document. "We'll print another copy tomorrow," he said. Of course. For the rest of dinner, I gave them exactly what they expected. I asked harmless questions. I praised Adrian's vision. I smiled when Matteo raised his glass and toasted our beautiful shared future. But their Spanish conversation continued. They discussed a $7 million advisory payment that would go directly to Adrian after closing. They discussed a development loan that would remain attached to my family trust. Then, Matteo asked when Adrian planned to leave for Madrid. 2 weeks after closing, my husband replied. And Nora? Adrian didn't even look at me. By then, she'll be your problem. On the drive home, Adrian placed one hand on my leg. You were quiet tonight. I'm overwhelmed. There's nothing to be afraid of. He looked at the road while he said it. This deal is going to protect you for the rest of your life. I turned toward the window so he wouldn't see my expression. He wasn't protecting my life. He was selling the next 5 years of it. At 6 the following morning, I entered the barrel room through the rear door. Teresa was already waiting. She was 56, with silver beginning to show in her dark hair and hands stained permanently by decades of harvests. She had worked beside my father before Adrian entered our lives. One look at my face was enough. What did he do? She asked. He's selling Hale Ridge. Teresa stared at me. He can't. He thinks I'm going to help him. She placed a cardboard storage box on the table. For almost a year, Adrian had been sending contracts through my office for routine approval. Insurance renewals, vendor agreements, distribution licenses. He always marked the signature pages with small yellow tabs. I had trusted him. Teresa had found copies of everything inside the archive room. Miriam Blake arrived 20 minutes later. She wore an old navy coat over her pajamas and carried the same brown briefcase she had owned since I was a child. I handed her the photographs I had taken of the wine-stained contract. Miriam read silently. Then she turned to page 47. Her expression changed. What is it? I asked. This isn't an investment agreement. She pushed the pages toward me. It's an acquisition. The public announcement described a $42 million partnership. The real agreement transferred 70% of our operating company to a newly created Salazar Meridian subsidiary. The farmhouse would become executive hospitality accommodation. Our eastern vineyard would be cleared for luxury villas. And I would be required to remain at Hale Ridge for 5 years as its exclusive public representative. My name, my face, my family history. Even my presence at the farmhouse had been assigned a monetary value. If I refused an event, criticized the new owners, left the property, or worked for another company, I could owe them $8 million. Miriam tapped one paragraph. This is what Adrian meant at dinner. I read the sentence aloud. Founder and brand principal Nora Hale shall transfer with the acquired business and remain exclusively available to the purchaser. I felt physically sick. He put me inside the contract. Miriam's voice was quiet. He built a cage and called it a partnership. But the cage wasn't the worst part. The agreement included my personal guarantee on an $11.4 million development loan. Salazar Meridian would receive our land and brand. Adrian would receive $7 million. And if the development failed, the debt would remain with me. Teresa opened another folder. There's something else. Inside were copies of 4 preliminary approvals bearing my signature. I had never seen them before. Miriam examined each one. These are forged. Adrian had used my signature to convince lenders and investors that I already supported the acquisition. But he still needed my original signature on the founder's consent certificate. The land belonged to the Hale Family Trust. No transfer could be completed without my handwritten approval, witnessed by an independent notary. That was why he had taken me to dinner. That was why he had held my hand. That was why he needed me smiling. I wasn't being invited into a partnership. I was the final locked door. And Adrian believed 17 years of marriage had given him the key. Miriam spent the next 2 hours examining bank statements and corporate records. At 9:15, she found the $7 million payment. It was going to a company called Cole Strategic Holdings. The company had been formed 4 months earlier. Its only director was Adrian. Its registered address belonged to Celeste Ward, his executive assistant. I recognized her name immediately. Celeste had worked with Adrian for 3 years. She was 34, polished, ambitious, and always strangely uncomfortable around me. Teresa found 2 first-class travel confirmations attached to one of Adrian's expense reports. One ticket belonged to Adrian Cole. The second belonged to Celeste Ward. Their destination was Madrid. Their departure date was 14 days after the sale. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Teresa reached for my hand. "Nora, I'm all right. It was a lie, but it was the only one I could manage. The affair hurt. Of course it hurt. But what shattered me was the precision of everything. Adrian hadn't simply fallen in love with someone else. He had calculated the value of my trust, forged my name, sold my father's land, attached millions in debt to me, and arranged his escape. Then he had taken me to dinner and kissed my cheek." Miriam leaned back. "We can stop the transfer today. I can notify the bank and the board." "Not yet." Both women looked at me. "If we stop it now, Adrian will call everything a misunderstanding. He'll blame Mateo or Celeste. He'll destroy whatever we haven't found." "What do you want to do?" Teresa asked. "I want him to finish the deal." Miriam studied me for several seconds. Then she nodded. My father had placed a protection clause inside the company's operating agreement years earlier. If any officer attempted to sell trust property without founder authorization, concealed personal compensation, or forged a founder's approval, that officer could be removed immediately. Any unvested ownership interests would be cancelled. Adrian knew the clause existed. He simply believed I would sign before I understood what he had done. But we still had one problem. Mateo represented an enormous company. If Salazar Meridian claimed it knew nothing about the forged documents, Adrian could shift most of the responsibility onto him. Miriam searched the company's corporate filings. Then, she leaned closer to the screen. "Interesting, what?" "Mateo doesn't own Salazar Meridian. He said it was his family's company." "It is, but 74% of its voting shares belong to the Lucía Salazar Family Trust." "Who is Lucía?" "Mateo's wife." Mateo had presented himself as the man controlling the money. In reality, his wife controlled every major decision. According to the company bylaws, Mateo couldn't authorize an investment over $5 million without Lucía's written approval. An approval was attached to our agreement. But Miriam believed that signature was forged too. She found a private office number in an old corporate directory. I called it myself. A woman answered in Spanish. "My name is Nora Hale," I said in the same language. "Your husband is attempting to purchase my family's vineyard." There was a pause. "I'm aware of a proposed investment," she answered. "Are you aware he promised my husband $42 million? The pause grew longer. No, are you aware that the agreement contains your authorization? What agreement? I told her about the dinner. I repeated the sentence Matteo and Adrian had exchanged. The vineyard, the farmhouse, the family name, and Nora. She comes with the deal. Luca became completely silent. Then she asked me to send the documents to her personal attorney. 20 minutes later, she called back. That is not my signature. Matteo had done to his wife exactly what Adrian had done to me. Both men had built their deal using authority they didn't possess and signatures belonging to women they assumed would never ask questions. Luca's voice remained controlled, but I could hear fury beneath every word. When is the final signing? Saturday evening. Does my husband believe you will attend? Yes, then don't disappoint him. Luca flew into Virginia the following night. No one told Matteo. For the next 2 days, I lived beside Adrian and performed the role he had written for me. The loving wife, the sentimental owner, the harmless face of Hale Ridge. When I returned home Friday afternoon, he had filled the dining room with white roses, my favorite flowers. For years, receiving them had made me feel loved. Now I wondered whether he had ordered them himself or asked Celeste to do it. Adrian poured champagne and handed me a freshly printed contract. I'm sorry I pushed you too hard, he said. I know change frightens you. Change didn't frighten me, but I lowered my eyes and allowed him to believe it did. I don't want to lose what Dad built. He placed both hands around mine. You won't lose anything. I'm protecting you. I almost admired how easily he said it. Then let's sign publicly, I suggested. Tomorrow night in the tasting room, we can invite the employees and announce the partnership together. Adrian hesitated. That isn't necessary. It would show everyone I support you. His eyes brightened. That was the bait. Not love. Public approval. He needed Hale Ridge's loyal daughter standing beside him while he sold her father's land. All right, he said. We'll make it unforgettable. I think we will. Later that night, I deliberately practiced a simple Spanish greeting within Adrian's hearing. I mispronounced almost every word. He laughed. You should probably stick to English tomorrow. I forced myself to laugh with him. Then he called Matteo from his office. The door remained partly open. In Spanish, Adrian said, she still can't say good evening. We have nothing to worry about. Matteo replied, by this time tomorrow, Hale Ridge is ours. After the call ended, Adrian continued messaging someone. My phone buzzed several minutes later. Miriam had accessed the company email archive under an emergency preservation order. She sent me one message Adrian had written to Celeste. Nora signed Saturday. Payment clears Monday. Madrid Friday. After 17 years, I finally get a life that belongs to me. I sat at the edge of our bed and read the sentence 3 times. After 17 years, I finally get a life that belongs to me. As if our marriage had been a prison. As if my father's company had stolen something from him. As if taking everything from me was simply the price of setting himself free. I noticed Adrian's reflection in the bedroom mirror. He stood in the doorway watching me. Are you crying? I locked my phone. Just thinking about Dad. He came over and wrapped his arms around me. For one dangerous second, my body remembered the man I had once loved. Then he whispered, tomorrow will secure everything we've worked for. He was right, just not in the way he expected. The tasting room was full by 6 o'clock Saturday evening. Our employees stood beside local reporters, distributors, lenders, and members of our advisory board. Adrian had placed a long table beneath a photograph of my parents during their first harvest. 2 contracts waited beneath the lights. Matteo arrived wearing a dark blue suit and the smile of a man who believed he was about to own everything he could see. Luca entered through the rear door and waited with Miriam inside my father's former office. Matteo had no idea his wife was in the building. Adrian began with a speech. He talked about family. He talked about loyalty. He talked about protecting Hale Ridge for future generations. Then, he called me the soul of the vineyard. Listening to him was like watching a stranger perform our marriage. When he finished, the room applauded. Adrian invited Matteo onto the stage. Matteo described a respectful partnership that would preserve our traditions. Neither man mentioned the luxury villas, neither mentioned the debt. Neither mentioned the 5-year contract controlling my name, home, and movements, and neither mentioned the $7 million waiting for Adrian. The notary placed the documents on the table. Matteo signed first. Adrian signed next. Then Adrian picked up the gold pen and held it toward me. "This is your father's legacy," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And our future." I stepped forward. Before taking the pen, I looked directly at Matteo. Then I spoke in fluent Spanish. "The wife does not come with the deal." Matteo's smile vanished. The entire room fell silent. Adrian stared at me. I continued in Spanish. "Neither does her home, her name, or her father's vineyard." Matteo turned toward Adrian. "You said she couldn't understand us." I answered before Adrian could. "He also said I would smile wherever you put me." Then I smiled. "Was this the smile you imagined?" Adrian grabbed my arm. "What are you doing?" I pulled away. Translating, I faced our employees. 3 nights ago, my husband told Matteo Salazar that this agreement included Hale Ridge, my farmhouse, my family name, and me. A murmur moved through the room. Adrian stepped toward the microphone. "She misunderstood a private joke." "Then let's discuss the serious parts." Miriam entered carrying the original operating agreement. Teresa followed her. Then Lucía Salazar walked into the tasting room. Matteo's face turned gray. "Lucía?" She looked at him with frightening calm. "You promised $42 million from a trust you don't control." Matteo started speaking rapidly in Spanish. Lucía stopped him. "Use English. Nora shouldn't have to translate your excuses too." Miriam distributed copies of the acquisition schedules to the board. I opened mine to page 47. "This agreement requires me to remain at Hale Ridge for 5 years. It controls my public appearances, my name, my image, and where I live. If I leave, I owe the buyer $8 million. Adrian shook his head. "That language is standard." "Is forging my signature standard?" No one moved. I placed the 4 forged approvals on the table. The bank representative stepped forward to examine them. Adrian's confidence finally cracked. "I didn't forge anything." "Then perhaps Celeste did it for you." His eyes snapped toward mine. That was when he realized I knew everything. I placed the payment schedule beside the forged signatures. $7 million was going directly to Cole Strategic Holdings, the company you registered at Celeste Ward's address. "Nora, listen to me. Will Celeste be joining us in Madrid?" His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Matteo turned toward Adrian. "You told me she knew nothing." In Spanish, I answered. He confused loyalty with stupidity. Then, I looked at both men. "So did you." Lucía's attorneys had frozen Salazar Meridian's funding that morning. Without her approval, Matteo's signature was worthless. And because Adrian had signed the agreement acknowledging his secret payment, he could no longer pretend he had never seen it. Miriam opened my father's operating agreement. Under Section 12, Adrian Cole's attempt to transfer trust property without founder authorization constitutes an immediate breach of fiduciary duty. I faced my husband. "Effective tonight, you are removed as president of Hale Ridge Vineyard." His face went pale. "You can't do that." "I just did." "You need the board." Teresa placed the board's written resolution on the table. The vote had taken place that afternoon. Every independent member had supported Adrian's removal. His company access had already been terminated. His ownership interests were suspended pending the fraud investigation. Security was waiting outside. Adrian lowered his voice. "I built this company with you." "No. You learned where we kept the keys. You would have lost Hale Ridge without me, perhaps, but saving something once doesn't give you the right to steal it later. His expression changed. For the first time that evening, I saw fear. What happens to me? I looked at the man I had loved for 17 years. Part of me wanted to humiliate him. A larger part simply wanted him gone. You leave with what you brought onto this land, I said. Your name. Adrian reached for my hand. I stepped back. Please, Nora, we can fix our marriage. You booked 2 tickets to Madrid. He closed his eyes. Mine wasn't one of them. Security escorted Adrian from the tasting room. Matteo tried to follow, but Luca stopped him. You're coming with me. He protested that she was destroying him over one unauthorized deal. Luca looked toward me, then back at her husband. No, we're simply refusing to let you profit from what you did. As Matteo left with his company's attorneys, Luca approached me. They built an agreement requiring 2 women's signatures, she said, and somehow convinced themselves the women were the least important people involved. For the first time in 3 days, I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because I could finally breathe. The investigation lasted 9 months. Bank records showed that Adrian had forged more than my signature. He had created false board minutes, concealed debts, and moved company money into Cole's strategic holdings. Prosecutors eventually charged him with fraud, forgery, and attempted misappropriation of trust assets. Matteo was removed from every position inside Salazar Meridian. Luca filed for divorce and brought a civil action to recover the money he had taken from her family trust. Celeste never boarded the flight to Madrid. She cooperated with investigators after learning that Adrian had placed several fraudulent transactions in her name. Apparently, I wasn't the only woman he had considered disposable. My divorce was finalized the following spring. Adrian once asked through our attorneys whether I truly believed all 17 years meant nothing. I didn't. That was what made grieving so difficult. Some of our happiness had been real, but love in the past cannot excuse calculated cruelty in the present. I kept Hale Ridge. More importantly, I changed it. Teresa became president of the operating company. We created an employee ownership trust so the people who had protected the vineyard would share in its future. We canceled the resort development and restored the eastern vines. I removed my portrait from the label Adrian had designed. Our next vintage carried a simple drawing my father had made of the original farmhouse. Beneath it were 4 words, grown by those who stayed. 1 year after the signing night, we held our harvest dinner beneath the old elm tree where Adrian and I had married. I gave my entire speech in Spanish. When I finished, Teresa hugged me. Your pronunciation is finally improving, she whispered. We both laughed. Later that evening, I walked alone through the vineyard. The farmhouse windows glowed in the distance. Music drifted from the harvest tables. Around me were the voices of families whose work had kept Hale Ridge alive. For years, Adrian had convinced me that he was the person protecting my inheritance. The truth was much simpler. He had protected his place inside it. The moment he believed he could take everything and leave, he tried. But my father had been right. Adrian could help me carry Hale Ridge. He could never own the woman carrying it. My husband told another man that I came with the deal. He was wrong. I was never part of the deal. I was the woman who had the power to end it. If you were in my position, could you ever forgive Adrian, or was his betrayal beyond forgiveness? Tell me in the comments. And if this story reminded you never to mistake someone's kindness for weakness, comment, I was never part of the deal. Like this video, subscribe to Calm Love Circle, and remember, the quietest woman at the table may be the only person who understands everything being said.